not a kid anymore, obviously, but he's still having fun, and he just exudes that enthusiasm and exuberance and playful nature that we love, and it is really, I think, one of his greatest strengths. So if he can hang on to that, I still like his chances.
How long is he going to be able to manage the fire that he has so far in the races? That's my big question about how dominant he was at the UAE Tour.
Arriving at the start of the tour, just thankful to be there. Actually, really fighting for the win and being a contender in a way that most people had maybe written him off from. That the physical and mental toll from that fight really, really, he acknowledged took a lot out of him.
You can't take the whole peloton into the last kilometer and not know where you're going. It's insane. Today on Beyond the Podium, the early season racing is well underway and the big guns are firing already. Tadej Pogacar and Jonas Vingegaard already with big wins this year. Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Roll and joined by Brent Bookwalter. Brent, where do we find you on this fine day?
Very good to see you. You find me in the basement over here in Blackman, North Carolina, just
Not
outside
because
of
you're in
Asheville.
trouble.
And no, just hiding from all the noise and house projects that are still going on here, and we're still battling uh, reliable internet after all the hurricane mess. So bear with me if I get a little pixelated and grainy, as if I was back on the European continent.
Well, already a couple of big stage races, and already the stars of the Tour de France are at, it seems like, pretty close, if not their very best. So let's talk about the UAE Tour first with Tadej Pogacar, a dominant performance. And we'll get to Jonas's efforts in the Tour of Algarve in a second. But Tadej absolutely flying down in UAE already in February.
Yeah, Bob, I'm interested to hear what you thought about the performance in UAE from Pogacar. Really big for his team. I think that's important to note with that organization. You know, they haven't won that race recently, but it is essentially, you know, a home race for them. And they decided it was really important, and they're sending their guy resplendent in the world champion jersey. Really, I got to say, he wears it well, very classy, looks the part, lives the part, and classic Pogacar. Like what I loved about UAE, you know, the blocks day one, he's like in mixing it up, just like we love with Tade. He's in the sprint, he lead out, he's like putting the sprinters under pressure. And we really saw it like every form of Tade in little micro doses there. We saw him going in a crazy suicide, you know, if you will, sort of break on a sprint day. Saw him mixing it up in the sprinters. We saw him do a strong time trial, and then yeah, sealing the deal with a big dominant physical display on the final summit finish. So uh, yeah, I think really strong performance, but like anything less than that from him, from that team in that race, and we would have been like, ooh, it was kind of it was kind of an all or nothing play to send their world champion and their leader to that race. If they wouldn't have got a win, if he wouldn't have got the win, it would have been like, ooh, big failure, head scratcher. So yeah, confirmation, but also like exactly what we'd expect.
Well, yeah, when he is at his best, he can rampage off the front of just about any type of terrain. And we saw that on both of the climbing stages in the UAE Tour. So, as expected and delivered by Tadej Pogacar, the time trial, I mean, Josh Tarling had a day of days in a 68 pizza plate front chainring by 11. And I'm not sure if that's indicative of Tadej's power against the clock. And we'll get to that in a second when we talk about Jonas Vingegaard in Algarve. But a solid performance in the time trial. I thought, you know what? I bet he wanted to win that. And maybe that was the only thing that could have gone a little bit better in the UAE Tour for Tadej.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Like Tade, he's also a time trialist, like the best of them in the world. But I think it is sort of nice. I mean, me watching it also as a spectator and a fan, it's nice to see like someone else, a real specialist of the TT win. And that's what it was. Let's face it. I remember racing in UAE. You know, it is that those TT stages are, you know, essentially pancake flat, super windy. Mentioned the massive chain ring. So I don't think we can draw too many conclusions there in terms of Tadej's TT prowess, his dominance, his confidence for the Grand Tours. A TT in the UAE Tour in February on that kind of course over that distance is a whole different beast than the showdown when the seconds and the minutes are really going to matter come July. But yeah, and another chance just to work through the kinks, like get the bike out. But yeah, awesome performance by Josh Tarling, and again, like it's nice to see. And I think it's nice for even the competitors, these TT specialists, to know, like, hey, like put us in February, put us on a flat course, give us our massive pizza pan, and we even have a chance to slay the dragon, the road world champion in Tade.
I think it was a pretty ideal debut of the season. It is February, and if we look back at Tadej's schedule last year, and even all the way back to October 7th of 2023 when he won Lombardia, started last year, 2nd of March in Strade Bianche, just crushing people. That went all the way through to Lombardia again in 2024. And now we're just in February. And the one thing that worries me, Brent, correct me if I'm wrong, is how long can Tadej keep doing those kind of incredible efforts? How long is this going to last? It seems like it started right wherever he left off. He picked up in 2025, but how long is he going to be able to manage the fire that he has so far in the races? That's my big question about how dominant he was at the UAE Tour.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bob. I mean, that is the challenge that we see with these champions that get on the roll, whether it's a sprinter or a GC rider or a climber. It's one thing to arrive at the top and stay there for a little bit. It's another thing to just continue that dominance, week after week, month after month, and now year after year. You could argue that it is a precarious position and can get a little wobbly on the top. What I like about Tade in that conversation about staying at the top, maintaining the momentum, is when you read his interviews, when you see him at the finish, even when you see how he's racing in terms of, going in the crazy break on the sprinter stage, he's still the relaxed Tade who's inspired. He hasn't changed anything, his mentality or his psyche. He's still quite relaxed. And we're going to talk about it a little more in a few minutes. I think it even goes along to his race schedule, going through the year. He has not picked four more stage races between now and the tour to maintain that streak of excellence. He said, "You know what? No, right now for where I'm at in my career, I'm really inspired and motivated to go on a rampage through the one-day races." And I think him listening to that internal drive, that fire, having some flexibility and belief from his team, that is a strong sort of support for him being able to continue, as opposed to the other sort of like option to where the team says, "Tade, no, you have to do for these big classic one-day races, and it's crazy. You have to race 40 days before the tour. This is how we've always done it since the beginning of the time, and you've got to win every one." If we were seeing that, then I'd be like, "Oh, I don't think he can hold it." But like, you still look at the guy and the way you see him race, he's still this. He's not a kid anymore, obviously, but he's still having fun, and he just exudes that, yeah, enthusiasm and exuberance and playful nature that we love, and it is really, I think, one of his greatest strengths. So if he can hang on to that, I still like his chances.
I was wondering about Tade being maybe the last true all arounder. And so I look back, took a while to find out who has won the Tour of Flanders and the Tour de France. What is the other cyclists that have been able to do that? Had to go back to 1975, and that cyclist was Eddie Merckx. And you don't, I, the Froome era, I looked at uh, his classics results, and he's done 9 monuments. I think he finished 5, and it's in the triple digits to the to the best. So very different in the classics anyway from Tade, and going all the way back to Eddie Merckx. It's really remarkable when you consider that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's why we keep saying we're, come July, last July, we're putting him in that conversation of the greatest of all time, right next to Eddie Merckx. And yeah, it goes to show. I think even in this modern time of cycling, where it's become even more specialized, and it's harder to double up, it's harder to be as versatile, arguably more than it was, back in the '70s or even when
Yes.
you were racing. Tade still maintains the ability to do that, but he's he's not being forced to do it. It really truly is like natural in terms of his ability, but also quite natural and authentic in what he wants, which is what I love about him as a competitor. In addition to the dominance and the strength and his team is also up for the challenge too. Like they've
Yes,
shown like whether it's
good
the one
point.
day races or the stage races, the grand tours, like they're not thin or lacking or really wanting, in any
Yeah,
of those environments.
that is a great point. Is that he has to have the teammates, and he needs a variety of teammates. I don't think anybody that did the Giro also did the Tour de France last year for the UAE squad of Tadej Pogacar. So um, that's a those results might not be possible on a different team, except maybe Visma Lisa bike.
Yeah, the two powerhouses really of the world of cycling at the moment, and also the two teams, um, yeah, really at the fore. The other thing that's interesting, I think, in terms of the one day race discussion versus stage race discussion, you hear these riders talk about it, and Tade and Jonas, and you also hear their teams talk about it. The tour still sort of is the looming sort of foreboding presence in the room and what they're working towards. But you hear him multiple times talk on, and then the Vuelta, and then the Vuelta, like afterwards. So yeah, they're saying the priority is the tour. Even for Tade, he wants to win these one day races. He wants to win San Remo, but they are sort of calculating that effort and metering that out, going like, well, when this does go to plan through the spring and July, we also have to consider that we're going to have a little in the tank in terms of race days and total energy for the Vuelta. So I think when we're talking about Tade's schedule and is this crazy to have a buildup of so few races, a focus on the one day races, you also consider the Vuelta and how that fits in. What are your thoughts there?
I would, yeah, I'd say that the Tour de France pays all the bills, for all the teams. It is the top of the mountain, and Tade will be wanting to defend his title. And um, I think that the Vuelta now has become so big and so important for all the teams that it is a good um, catcher in the rye, if you will. The finder of lost children is the Volta a España. And so if anything does go haywire between now and the Tour de France for Tadej Pogacar, or a lot of the other competitors that will be there, and it's going to be great to see a strong field in the Volta, I think it is definitely a good idea to have that in the back of your mind, considering how dangerous professional cycling is now. We saw that with Jonas in the Tour of the Basque Country. And at the start of last year's season, Jonas was on absolute fire. He had already won two stage races and 10 days of racing total. So that big crash, I think, affected him in the Tour de France. But it seems to me, Brent, that Jonas is back at a very high level already in the Tour of Algarve to start the season simultaneously with Tade.
Yeah, definitely, Bob. I think that's a good segue to shift over to Jonas now and look at his performance at Algarve. And not just consider the now and what he did recently last week, but also like let's go back to end of the Tour de France at the end of last July. Look at how much of he actually needed a physical and mental break. He acknowledged that comeback from that injury you just mentioned, the quest and crusade to go from being really scared for his life, not knowing what was going to happen in the big scheme of his life, larger health, arriving at the start of the tour, just thankful to be there, actually really fighting for the win and being a contender in a way that most people had maybe written him off from. That the physical and mental toll from that fight really, really, he acknowledged took a lot out of him, but he respected that. He took the break. That's a long chunk of time, though, from the end of the tour last year till now. And that's a lot different than Tade dominating at the world championships at Lombardy, which is much more recent than the end of the tour. So I think when we view Jonas's recent results and performance at Algarve, you also have to consider like, wow, like he had this big chunk of time. It kind of come full circle since last spring when he was so dominant, as you just mentioned. He was in the sort of classic Jonas form as we know him from, and really really back on tracks. So like, yeah, 365 days ago, you could argue like he's sort of back there in terms of the
Mhm.
and working towards his main goal, the Tour de France. And yeah, it's Algarve, so it's not the Tour, it's not the Dauphiné, but still, like as we talk about every race, these days in pro cycling. Extremely hard fought, extremely deep field. And, what I like about one of like the nods towards Jonas in his prep versus Tade is that, Algarve it's a European race. It's on the slicey, dicey streets of Portugal with that European feel. It's got the road furniture, the rough roads, the twistiness. It's got wind, the mountains, like really everything. Whereas UAE and Tade's success is a little more, maybe you could argue two dimensional just by nature of the big roads of the UAE. Jonas, he's back in the thick of it on the crazy European roads. They're not even sure where they're going half the time in Algarve. We saw that crazy first stage sort of redirect the peloton.
That's
All that's a lot different than the sort of like drag strips of the UAE, and I think
yes.
it's another data point on Jonas in that he didn't just arrive physically ready, but he also arrived like tactically, technically ready with his team around him, and
Yeah.
just really, really looked well. Finished it off really strongly, but not without like you mentioned with Tade at UAE and the TT, like he didn't win there. There early in the race at Algarve, there was a stage where Jonas wasn't really happy with his performance, wasn't really up to the level he thought he would be. We saw some weaknesses in him, but he did sort of remedy and come good and fix those by the end.
I did take a moment and have pause in the mountaintop finish when he was 10 seconds behind Jan Kristen, who's another rider we're going to be talking about, I think, for years to come. Very talented. Teammates with Tadej Pogacar. So the visual of two UAE guys, Joao Almeida and Jan Kristen, going up the road and dropping Jonas on stage number 2 of Algarve, that was like, whoo, it's going to be a long year for Visma again.
Yes. Yeah, that was tenuous to watch, and you can make that argument. You're like, "Wow, UAE has sort of their second string there fighting against Vingegaard and Visma's best." And they're sticking it to him. But like I will also say that that resilience that Jonas showed to come back from that and not let that defeat him. He didn't, get sick or his knee didn't start hurting and go home. It's like he stayed there, he persisted, he found a way to still stay confident and then really, delivering that finished blow in the final TT. So I think he definitely still has some work to do, but that's what you'd expect from a Tour de France contender. If he was truly at his best now, then you'd be worried come July. So, but yeah, again, man, that UAE team, we talked about the depth over and over and over they had last year throughout the season and the tour, but they're also picking up right where they left off in terms of sending really essentially support riders for Tade and really up against Jonas Vingegaard and very competitive. In the final GC at Algarve, we're talking seconds. These are not minutes. It was a good TT he did at the end, but it wasn't a blowout like we've seen from Jonas in July and when he's really really at his best.
A lot of talk about rider safety in the off season and throughout the early season. Algarve is a prime example of what I think the riders are talking about. You can't take the whole peloton into the last kilometer and not know where you're going. It's insane. I never thought. It's just almost it's almost impossible. It buggers the imagination that we spent months talking about rider safety, and this is what people are seeing in the first opening races of the season. It's inexcusable, and I understand it's not a world tour race. It's not the Tour de France. It's not the Vuelta. You don't have the infrastructure. You don't have as many marshals on the race course, but still, Lord have mercy, Brent. Like, the riders have a point. Like, come on, are you kidding?
Absolutely, and yeah, it's once again it's this discussion on safety. We're not talking a level of excellence at a race, the level of Algarve every kilometer through the day. But if you can focus it down, like the last 3, 5, 1 kilometers in terms of marking and signaling and clarity, come on, that is some low, low, low hanging fruit. So yeah, really frustrating and disappointing. I will say as a rider, I mean, not to not to beat up on a race that we love to watch and is important for the calendar, but I remember competing in Algarve personally, and this was years ago, more than a decade ago, and having the same observation. I remember being in a time trial there and having people walk across the road, cars drive across the road, dogs out riding next to me. And again, it's like, okay, yeah, maybe you can't control 200 kilometers of an open road stage meticulously with the level of excellence of the Tour de France at Algarve. But if you take a 30-kilometer time trial or the final 3 kilometers of a finish, that the level just has to rise. And my argument, even as a racer, was always, okay, you have Algarve, it's 5 stages, 6 stages, depending on the year. I think as a racer in the teams, you'd rather have 3 or 4 done really well than have 6 and have this, complacency in the last kilometer. So, yeah, it's frustrating. We had this conversation all, off season when we were
Yeah,
scratching for things to talk about, and now we got plenty to talk about. The racing is thick
too
and
much.
heavy, and there's tons of it. More. There's too many races going on last week. We can't even cover it. Yet we're still coming back to the bonehead safety issues. So I'm just happy that one. Yeah, frustrating and sort of embarrassing sight to see, but thankfully no one hurt, and everyone
Yes,
is
absolutely.
living to go on to another day and another race.
So put on your crystal ball gazing to for the future. Who got the better, Jonas or Tade, at the start of the season in February? Who had a better February amongst the two? Probably at this
Oh,
point, Brent. Also, the number one and two, 2 and 1 competitors for the Tour de France this summer, Jonas and Tade.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, these guys are on that collision course for the Tour de France. No doubt about it. Absolutely. Both poised, ready, coming out of the off season, exactly where they need to be. Uh, I didn't see any one thing from either one of them that really would lead me to say, like, in their court versus the other. If I had to choose right now and speaking to that crystal ball today on February 25th, and our producer can't hold me to this come July when we're in the studio at the start of the tour because things will change. But I
Yes.
still like Tade because of that momentum. Like you said, I love the momentum. I love his relaxed nature, and he's just been so dominant through the last year and now even the past week that there's no reason. All signs point to that for me. Um, yeah, but it's so easy to quickly go into devil's advocate and say, "But Jonas this, Jonas that," and there's plenty, endless of those. So, where are you at, Bob? Are you gonna play the counter argument there?
I I'll say this: after stage two, I was like, "Oh no, Jonas is cracked." But obviously, Jonas was not cracked. He was at almost his best in the time trial, and that was great to see because I was thinking like, "Oh no, he's going to have 6 stages and a 10-minute win in the Tour de France for Tade again." Um, which would be fine with me, but for fans of Vingegaard and all the other GC contenders, it might have not been that much fun. But I was very pleased with the way Jonas, like you said, Brent, fought back. And assuming everything goes smoothly, he should be at his very best for the Tour de France and maybe even a little bit better than Tade. But Tade's improved dramatically, I think, since Jonas beat him in 2023. So if those two guys are at their best that we've seen so far this year, it's going to be a fantastic battle in the Tour de France. And it should stay a little bit closer throughout the first half of the tour because we had already on stage number 4, big stage in the Alps, and Tade was just absolutely long gone like a turkey through the corn in the 2024 Tour de France by stage 4. Anyways, I was thrilled what I saw in February between the two big contenders for the Tour de France. I'll say that, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think we'll likely get this pendulum. Even you say that about last year's tour in stage 4, all Tade, but I remember, having those conversations in the studio, trying to anticipate what's going to happen each stage, and still, even after stage 4, there was a lot of momentum swinging back and forth, and there was still a lot of, I mean, especially with TJ, who was standing next to me, who's not here now, so I can go in hard on him. Um, but there was still yeah, it still was not by no means a done deal, and I think yeah, the rivalry is as alive as ever, it's as exciting as ever, and we're not. What's also exciting about it is we're not going to get this real apples to apples comparison. Just like you could argue, like UAE and Algarve, they're both stage races, but they're very different in topography, environment, road style. We're not gonna see this head to head from Jonas and Tade repeatedly through the spring. So it's really going to keep us guessing, and that'll just be another storyline that yeah, the days of us having nothing to talk about, Bob, are over,
They're over
which
for
I'm
this year.
grateful
Yeah.
for. Yeah, they're over for this year.
So Tade is taking a, let's say, non-traditional approach to the season before the Tour de France. Jonas, a little bit more stage races, a little bit more typical preparation for the Tour de France that we've seen in recent years. What do you make of Tade's, throughout the spring anyways, focus on one-day monuments, the massive one-day races of the calendar that are generally contested by specialists? Tade, of course, is in a different category. He's singular. He's very unique in that sense. But looking at the Tour de France, his actual race schedule between now and then, do you think that's an advantage for Jonas?
I don't think it's an advantage for Jonas only because it is Tade and he is his own sort of species of one, really, and the usual rules don't apply. And I think this is you could use this to like start like kind of a larger discussion about you know coming back for a repeat success on a goal. Like if it's not broken, don't fix it. If it works once, keep doing it again. But I think what we're seeing in cycling and a lot of high level sport and performance in general is that just because it worked once doesn't mean you can cut, copy, paste it exactly the same way again. It's constant innovation, it's constant stepping up. And that's not just from a physiological level. It's not just looking at the load that said stage race or said one day will put into the body and this adaptation that it will create in order to arrive at the Tour de France. Tade is this he's this like yeah, enigmatic, most alive, creative like artist of a champion. So he's realized and recognized that he's like peeling over a new canvas and he's got different paint out and he's like splashing it on in all these different new ways and that's what this approach is for him. And I like it only for him. Like I don't think if Jonas said that was his schedule for the tour, I'd be like, man, that's not gonna work for you. Like, you guys are they are back doing the math, do the
Grasping at straws, yeah.
calculations. Yeah, I don't think it would work for them, but yeah, it's another one of these like you do you, Tade, and I think this is him. He's really inspired and motivated to try to win San Remo, to take a stab at Flanders, and uh, as a fan, I love that. I mean, this is a treat to have the rider who's the defending champion of the Tour de France line up his spring schedule in such a way. It's this is kid in the candy store stuff. So I love it. But what do you think, Bob? That approach back in your day when you were racing would have been really unheard of. No way.
Yeah, no,
No way would they have done
that,
that. That wouldn't get you.
yeah,
That would not get you the form.
no, that was not the template. And the training wasn't evolved enough in between whatever races you're doing to allow somebody even to consider that. But like you said, Tade is so exceptional. He's such a unique, one of a kind athlete that um, I think that he'll be absolutely flying at the Tour de France again, even though he had a huge stage race before last year's tour. And when he announced his schedule last year, I'm doing the Giro and the Tour. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's impossible. It's not. You're going to be dead in the
You
water.
can't do it.
You're going to get killed by Jonas. Even worse." And then, of course, it's now we know the
Yeah.
real Tadej Pogacar. So yeah, I agree. He can do whatever he wants. He doesn't even have to race until the Tour. He'd probably be competitive.
It's so good even for us too, Bob, because we can flash forward part of our crystal ball covering the race. If Tade is not absolutely flying the first 5 stages, we can be like, we're going to be playing the game. Well, he didn't have
Yes.
as many races. Maybe he's not as prime, and it's just going to be this like, yeah, this like keep them guessing get thing, and I suspect will lead to a down to the wire, real exciting full 3 weeks. So I'm all for it.
Absolutely.
Keep it coming, Tade.
Yeah, and like you said, we are off to the races, and I could not be happier. Beyond the podiums are going to be launched into the stratosphere for now through the rest of the season. Thanks, Brent, and hopefully I'll see you soon at some point. Might have to come out to the mountains and do some skiing in Colorado if you could get a pass.
Please. Yes. Bring me out, Bob. I'll be maybe I'll be
All right.
sneaking out in the cover of night and joining you. But yeah, great to check in, and hopefully I'll see you on the slopes, if not on another Beyond the Podium soon.
All right, Brent. Thanks a lot, and thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you soon.
For all your cycling content year-round, subscribe to NBC Sports YouTube page. We got it all.